Chinese-ruled Hong Kong voted on Wednesday to ban ivory sales in the world's largest ivory retail market. The vote in the former British colony, where ivory has traded for more than 150 years, came a month after China, the world's largest importer and end user of elephant tusks, banned their sale. More than 90% of people buying ivory in Hong Kong are from mainland China. Hong Kong adheres to the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora, which began to regulate the international ivory trade in the 1970s and has banned such trade since 1990. Only ivory hunted before 1990 is allowed to be traded when it is accompanied by a pre-convention certificate, but trade in pre-convention ivory has been thriving in China and Hong Kong since 1975. Environmental activists have long asserted that Hong Kong's legal ivory market has enabled traders to launder illegal products. After the bill is enacted, pre-convention ivory imports and re-exports into and out of Hong Kong will be prohibited. Dr. Jimmiel Mandima is a Director of Program Design and Partner Relations at the African Wildlife Foundation in Washington, D.C. in the United States. He joins us via Skype. Dr. Mandima, thank you so much for joining us. Now, how seriously affected are elephant populations globally?
So, thank you again for having us to speak about the plight of elephants. We have, over the last 10 years, been fighting a very serious battle to combat the crisis of elephant populations. We are aware that from the recent statistics, we are losing 30% of elephants in the last 10 years. And every year we lose 8% of elephants, which is more than the rate of annual regeneration. So the elephant populations are seriously affected by poaching, and it is important to see that the consumer countries are now taking action to stop and close the domestic ivory market.
What do you make of these new laws, the recent being legislation out of Hong Kong? Do you think they will help and make a difference?
They certainly do. Part of what drives this transnational organized criminal activity is that there is a demand for people that are willing to pay high amount of money to get ivory. So the fact that one of the largest global markets for ivory is now headed to closure in itself means that there would not be no appetite for anybody in Hong Kong in this case to be buying illicit ivory. So what we hope would happen eventually is that whoever is perpetrating this crime in Africa, in the source countries, hoping that they'll get a market in Hong Kong or anywhere else in the world, will be incentivized, and that in itself is a welcome addition to what we are all doing to combat illegal wildlife trafficking.
How big are these crime syndicates? And in terms of, let's talk about money-wise, in terms of figures. What sort of figures are we looking at in terms of illegal trade of ivory?
It's a big industry. I mean, we are really talking of the trade in illegal ivory and other illegal wildlife products getting to an annual total of close to 20 billion American dollars every year, and that's big. So the fact that it is transcending the entire globe from the source countries in Africa through the transit countries in Asia and within Africa and all the way to demand countries in Asia and elsewhere, America is involved, and Europe, in itself points to a very sophisticated network of criminals that are operating syndicates, not just in one place, but obviously across the globe. One cannot essentially define the actual size in terms of quantities, but just the volume of money being pushed and the extent through which this crime is being pushed across the world in itself is telling on the complexity and how lucrative it is.
Dr. Mandima, is there a change in attitude amongst Asian states in trying to fight the destruction of these endangered species?
There is. Over the last couple of years, there's been a lot of different levels of engagement, in particular with China, with Vietnam, with Hong Kong. So to the extent where what has now been pronounced as of yesterday is a culmination of ongoing discussions, awareness raising, where civil society has been working with government, with other civil society in Asia, to essentially start by saying, do you know that by the time you buy ivory, it is actually a result of an elephant losing its life? And the majority of the people that we have talked to, through partners, they've clearly, demonstrated ignorance, that they didn't realize it took killing an elephant for them to end up buying ivory. So there is a lot of excitement and interest on the part of Asian consumers that they really would not want to partake of an industry that involves the killing of elephants from the wild. And government has likewise also moved. We saw China at the end of 2017 closing the domestic market. We have now seen Hong Kong doing the same. There is a lot of push that we are doing with other partners to engage civil society, working through celebrities from Asia. And we certainly think that Asia is turning the tide, albeit very slowly. We wish that could happen ASAP. But the truth of the matter is, I think they realize that they also cannot afford to see the decimation of elephants and other wildlife species under their watch, and they are trying to make steps towards being accountable.
Do you think African states are doing enough in protecting their own wildlife?
Enough is always a very subjective term to define. What I can categorically say is that Africa, at a continental level and at different levels below that, they have certainly publicly committed to combat illegal wildlife trafficking. The African Union already did make it clear that they are adopting a strategy to combat wildlife trafficking. And when you go to different levels at the regional economic communities, the Southern Africa Development Community and other regional blocs are also developing strategies for law enforcement for anti-poaching. And that in itself is a commitment by Africa to say, first of all, we are endowed by this rich, unique resource, and we cannot afford to see it being taken and stolen from us. And if anything, Africa, as part of their Agenda 2063, would want to see wildlife translate as a contributor to the economic development of Africa. Different countries have taken steps to improve their legal framework for wildlife crime, and perpetrators are now really facing the music. It's happening slowly, but I would almost confidently say that Africa is now bought into the idea of working together in unity to combat this crime, and are negotiating with the global community to also partner in the same.
Dr. Mandima, which countries are doing their best and which are failing dismally as we speak? You must have some sort of statistics with regards to where the biggest failings are and where the biggest successes are so far.
So I actually would put it differently. It's not so much about a country failing, but maybe more in terms about some geographies or areas which are seriously affected compared to others. And because what each country ends up doing or region is really dependent on some of the socio-economic and socio-political drivers. There are genuine constraints in countries where economic development is very low. So the amount of resources they're able to inject towards law enforcement to combat poaching are limited. It's very clear that a good number of the countries that are relying a lot on ecotourism, that is enjoying wildlife through tourism, when wildlife is alive in the wild by tourists visiting, are putting a lot of effort towards combating wildlife trafficking. We also know that there are some trouble hotspots as a result of security challenges in different other parts of Africa, which complicates the extent to which law enforcement to secure wildlife can be done. And these remain some of the hotspots which need a lot more help. I'm not aware of any particular government that has officially declared that they are complicit to the crime, because almost every country is a signatory to either a regional economic community agreement that seeks to combat wildlife trafficking, but there is variance between countries as to the extent to which they can actually invest in combating poaching.
Dr. Mandima, just in wrapping up, we know that China, Vietnam, Hong Kong, just Asia as a whole were part of the largest in terms of the illegal ivory. Presently, are there any other countries or other parts of the world where there is maybe an increase of the buying of illegal ivory, or some sort of development with regards to illegal ivory or dealing in endangered species that has been identified currently?
I wouldn't specify a particular country. What I would say is the fact that some of the largest markets for ivory are closing in itself, by implication, would probably likely result in the emergency of what used to be small markets, where the syndicates might start targeting the most unexpected markets. And as it stands now, I would basically say the entire world remains a contributor to the consumption of illicit ivory. Europe is one, the US is one, Latin America is one, and you can go on and on. In Asia itself, so for example, China and Hong Kong are the biggest markets, but Asia is much bigger than these two countries, and we know that there is potential for some of the smaller markets within Asia to emerge. And on the African continent itself, there is a lot of domestic ivory marketing, trading happening in different countries. So we still have long ways, which is probably why I would emphasize that, yes, we are making progress, we are turning the tide, but we should not in any way mistake it for solution and success. We have a long way to go, and we need to maintain the momentum of fighting this crime until we can secure our elephant populations at viable population levels.
Dr. Mandima, thank you so much for joining us. We'll leave it there for now. That's a view from Dr. Jimmiel Mandima, who is the Director of Program Design and Partner Relations at the African Wildlife Foundation in Washington, D.C.